Very kind of you to be with us as we get going with our interviews while I'm here live in St. Kitts for the Under-19 Cricket World Cup. It's the magic of technology with our Zoom link at 6:17 in Trinidad and Tobago and here in St. Kitts as well. But for everyone back in Trinidad and Tobago, for most people anyway, the concerns, especially those in the public sector, will be about whether or not I'm talking West Indies with my mind on West Indies cricket, or whether or not the Trinidad and Tobago government will go ahead with their mandate, or what they are saying is not really a mandate, but it is a de facto mandate related to people being vaccinated or therefore not being allowed to work and therefore having to stay at home without pay, because January 17th is fast approaching and there is no official word as yet regarding the law required for this vaccination policy for public servants. In an Express article on Tuesday, the Attorney General Faris Al-Rawi said, and we quote, "This is something that cannot be implemented without law. There is no intention to do anything other than act within the law, and it has to be passed by both houses of parliament," end quote. He added that consultations are ongoing and that he'll meet with the Prime Minister this week on the matter. You hear that, eh? This is something that was announced by the Prime Minister on December the 20th. And we're hearing a few days before the middle of the month that he will meet with the Prime Minister this week on the matter. The AG further noted that the Parliament can also have an urgent sitting to advance its position. Maybe that urgent sitting will be at midnight on the 16th to formalize the proceedings. But to get a legal perspective on this, we once again turn to Attorney Martin George. Mr. George, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, hi. Good morning to you, Fazil, and good morning to your team at TV6, and Happy New Year to you all and to the nation of Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, you see how so busy you are. You don't realize that we spoke already. I interviewed you with the new year already in, so it's coming up. But indeed, we appreciate your informed perspective on all of these matters. But given the timelines that we have now, because we're almost on the middle of the month already, the next Monday is January the 17th. Do you see this actually happening as something that will be required by public servants come next Monday, Martin George?
Well, very clearly, I think the government has dropped the ball on this, because what we are seeing here is a case of vaccine hesitancy versus government hesitancy. You know, we need clear, decisive leadership on these issues for zero. More than a year ago, our firm did a legal opinion. Should we legislate to mandate to vaccinate? There's also the legal opinion of Sir Dennis Byron, which he, former President of the Caribbean Court of Justice, which he did to the OECS heads, which makes it pellucid that there's more than sufficient ground for mandatory vaccinations. You have the legal opinion of Leslie Haynes, Queen's Counsel, which was done for the Attorney General of Barbados on the topic of mandatory vaccinations, which also supported it. So the fact of the matter is there is more than sufficient legal basis if it is that you have taken a decision to do so. And it is alarming that at this stage, on the 13th of January, for something that is supposed to come in effect on the 17th, you are still now saying that you want to engage in consultations and you still have to discuss, with the Prime Minister. I mean, I don't understand that at all. And it shows a lack of decisiveness on the part of the government. Look at Ralph Gonsalves Fazil. He bit the bullet, or well, maybe we could say he bit the big stone that was hurled at him, but he enforced his policies at the end of the day. He faced tremendous opposition and protest, but he was clear and decisive in terms of what he wanted to do. And that really is what we need here in TNT. We don't need vacillation on vaccination. And, you're going in fits and starts. You're announcing that this is your policy. You give a start date for it. And then when you get pushback, which you must have known was coming, you must have known that pushback would be coming, then you say you want to have more consultations. Really? I mean, this just doesn't seem to be the way to govern. And, I mean, shouldn't these consultations and discussions have come first?
This is nothing unusual, man, but I always rely on you to give us a nice phrase. So, vacillation on vaccination. Anyway, but there are a couple of things that come into the discussion. is it possible for there to be an emergency sitting of Parliament sometime between now and midnight on the 16th to allow for this to take effect on the 17th?
Well, Fazil, it is technically possible, but I don't see it being practicable because, I mean, clearly the opposition would object, and I think they will be well within their rights to do so because they will say, if you announced this since, almost mid-December, why are you waiting till the last moment to rush us into this thing where we don't have enough time to study what you have presented and to, formulate our position? So, I mean, it is not something that's going to be accepted easily at all if there's that attempt to do so. And, I mean, the fact of the matter is, even the consultations for Zero, we all remember the 1987 case of Jimmy Bain, which established from a constitutional context what consultation really is. All it means is that, look, I need to have discussions with you. I don't necessarily have to take everything you say or anything you say, but at least I've given you the opportunity. So these are things that ought to have been done before, and you prepare for these things. Because if you remember the book, The Art of War by Sun Tzu, he says, if your enemy is secure on all points, be prepared for him. If he is superior in strength, evade him. And I mean, the government should know what they're doing. So in other words, they ought to have been prepared. And if you know you were not ready, then leave this alone. Why appear to be so indecisive on the topic? When you look at the book 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, where it says, win through your actions, never through argument. If you say you're taking action and you're pausing to engage in argument, it doesn't appear as if you're going to be, somebody who is ready and prepared to go through with it. I mean, come on. I mean, I am not in government. I'm not a politician. I stay very far from politicians, but I mean, these are the books I grew up on, Fazil. If you understand me, these are the things I used to be reading when my partners in St. Mary's College were reading Archie comic books. I was reading Franz Fanon, Black Skin, White Mask, The Wretched of the Earth. I was reading Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment, The Brothers Karamazov. I was reading Gogol, Diary of a Madman, C.L.R.
Stop right here, Martin Joe. You're just reinforcing how uneducated I am and how deficient my library is in that regard. But I understand the point that you're making fully.
Government. If you understand me, come on, why are we appearing to be so unprepared, unready, unsure? It just does not look good. And then the thing is, let me tell you, the minute you hesitate like this for Zero, it is going to be harder even to try and really implement it when you do come back again with it, because then people will say, look, you're not serious. Then what about the people who were already, pressured into taking the vaccine because of your early announcement? If it now looks like you're hesitating and pulling back, they will say, so why did I even bother to do it?
Precisely. And another dimension to this, Martin George, and again, getting back into the practicalities of it, from what we hear from new Chief Secretary of the THA, Farley Augustine, he seems to be intimating that they are prepared to go their own way and develop their own mandate. But before we even get into that is he even allowed to do that? Isn't this the unitary state of Trinidad and Tobago? And if there's a diktat or a dictate or a legislation that eventually comes from government, isn't the THA mandated to follow that as well?
Well, there are two aspects to that, Fazil. First of all, legislative, right? If there is a law of Trinidad and Tobago, then that's a law covering Trinidad and Tobago. I couldn't put it simpler than that. Therefore, the THA would be bound to comply with the law of Trinidad and Tobago. You're quite right. We're a unitary state. Apart from that, there is case law precedent, the matter of Attorney General versus THA, where we have the judgment of the Honorable Justice Nadia Kangaloo, where she made it clear that using the Constitution and Section 75, which puts the cabinet in charge of Trinidad and Tobago, and she said, where there is a clear central government policy, the THA is bound to follow that policy. So it's not a choice. Once there's a clear central government policy on the issue, the THA does not have a choice. They have to follow that. They cannot make their own independent policy. So I was surprised when I saw the AG saying, well, he has to go and engage in discussions and stuff like that. There's that case already that all he has to do is cite that case to the THA and show them that, look, this is unless and until the law is changed, that's what we have to be guided by.
But isn't it, and there, I mean, the Attorney General on his own tone and whatever is a different matter, but isn't it unbecoming of Farley Augustine to be appearing to oppose this? Is he at this very early stage, after all his nice talk about, working together and, not having this confrontational manner, isn't he sort of digging in his heels, even if it's politely, to suggest that this is about us doing our own thing as a PDP, THA? That doesn't it sound like that?
Well, you see, remember Faziri, he is playing to his audience, and his audience loves that. They lap it up, if you understand me.
But I thought he said he's not in that. I thought he said that it's a different type of governance.
The fact of the matter is that the persons who put him in office, by and large, they love the idea of a Tobago strongman to show, that, they're putting Trinidad in its place. And I think he is gradually beginning to assume that role and that persona, and of course it works for him in that context, in terms of cementing and, establishing his position of power in Tobago. So I imagine that that's what we're seeing there, because if you look at the feedback he gets, it seems to be very positive. So I guess he's doing what is politically expedient.
And therefore, continuing, getting back to the main point, I mean, as we said, I mean, there are certain legislative things that have to be done before this thing kicks in. There are so many gray areas. How could a hospital be a safe zone? How could a school be a safe zone with unvaccinated children in there, as are allowed by the Ministry of Education? So given all of these realities, isn't it going to be a real climb down or a real embarrassment for the government to state, well, it's not going to happen again on the 17th, if that is to be the case?
If it will happen at all, because for you, as I said, once you as a leader start pulling back, then that is a sign of weakness, and people are going to become emboldened to say, well, listen, don't come back with this again, right? For you, listen, from a young age, I learned on leadership and success. One of my mentors was Dr. Anthony Sabga, and I learned so much from him because he was always reading, 2 books that he gave me, Barack Obama's Audacity of Hope and Robin Sharma's The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. We would spend hours talking and discussing ideas. And, you would think that the persons who are in leadership and that are in government now would at least have read some of these books and understood the principles and ideas there. Leadership must be clear and decisive. Faziri, let me tell you something. If I'm leading a team and I say we're going right, we're going right. If it later turns out that I was wrong, you can't win that argument with me, I will tell you I did not go wrong. I went right.
I hear you on that. Surely it also requires an understanding. By the way, I should point out that you sound like the young Sheldon of Trinidad and Tobago, theory, like you were reading Franz Fanon and so on while you were in the cradle. But this, I mean, surely, if you're in the business only of playing politics, surely you recognize that if your prime minister is going to say something on December the 20th, you have to tell yourself, given the emotions and the realities and practicalities with something like this, that you have to tell yourself that, look, by January the 8th or by January the 10th, for the absolute latest, this must be done and dusted as far as legislation and so on, so that we could roll into this rather than looking like if you don't know what you're doing.
Faziri, what has happened, it appears respectfully, and I mean, I always have the greatest of respect for high offices, but it appears that the government has put the cart before the horse, really and truly. It's almost like, you put on your pants, and then afterwards you put on your jockey shorts over that. And then you study, oh boy, what did I do? Come on, a 5-year-old knows that you put on jockey shorts first and then the pants afterwards.
Unless Martin George, you want to be Superman or Batman.
That's right, on the outside. Right, But, it's like you dress up in a 3-piece suit, you make this big announcement about a vaccination policy, and then, afterwards when you're home, you sit down in your jockey shorts and you're studying. Wait, what did I just do? How are we going to implement this? I mean, really and truly, Faziri, that qualifies you, if you do that kind of thing, to be the first winner of the Jockey Shorts Award for 2022. You deserve the Jockey Shorts Award if you do that, because it looks as if you really don't know what you're doing.
But and in the time that we have available, just have a couple of minutes left, Martin George, in relation to this. But the more important issue, and while we might be making light of it and finding humor in different things, it's the whole issue of this relationship between government and the governed. And again, it's the very start of the year, and people always talk about it's a new year, we can do things differently and so on. We see these things happening over and over again. It just seems to weaken the attitude towards these institutions. You talk about respect for office. I don't believe in that at all, but I understand the point that you're making. But at the end of the day, if a citizenry is expecting good governance and strong leadership and good guidance, I mean, but there's something as important as this, a pandemic, COVID-19, what do you anticipate happening between now and Monday? Are we going to see anything significant happening that could change the state of play right now, as a final thought?
It doesn't appear so, Fazil. It's actually degenerating into the theater of the absurd, because you have the judiciary, someone in the judiciary coming out making statements, then the judiciary itself coming out and denouncing. You have fire officers giving pushback. You have, OJT issuing its own announcement about vaccination. So what you have now, Fazil, is a discordant, chaotic cacophony of voices and noises, which only serve to obfuscate rather than elucidate. So this is not going to get better as we go along, because clearly this was not thought out properly. You have the THA basically thumbing its nose at the government in this regard, and now the AG is saying, well, he's going to try and talk to Farley about it, so these are the things you should have done from the start. These are the things you do before you make these announcements, instead of now running about like a headless chicken, not knowing where you're going. I mean, I don't know.
If you'd allow me, I mean, we have a couple extra minutes, and from what I understand now from my colleagues on our team, there's been no consultation with GTUM. There's been no consultation with the PSA, OWTU, some of the major, you talk about labor organizations in Trinidad and Tobago. So what are you really doing? What if it is that you're saying that this is such an important element of policy for us to be vaccinated, for the country to move forward, for the country to open up and so on, and you talk the talk, but you're nowhere close to walking the walk without your jockey shorts on the outside, what are you really doing?
You see, it really makes the entire government look bad. You see, this governmental hesitancy, because, so you have vaccine hesitancy, but now you're seeing governmental hesitancy. This pullback, this withdrawal, it then makes it even harder when you try to implement and enforce this policy later on. The simple truth of it, Fuzzy, is you can't be half pregnant. It's either you're going all the way or you're not going at all. And if you're not going all the way, then my advice to the government is keep your jockey shorts on.
Well, that's a good way to conclude our segment this morning, Martin George. Indeed, it may be disturbing that we've got a preoccupation with jockey shorts with our last two interviews, but you're right. There are many things here that raise more questions, and we're still searching for answers. But I want to thank you once again for taking the time to be with us this morning to offer your informed perspective and indeed remind us of that wide and deep ocean of knowledge from which you draw on Franz Fanon, Dostoevsky, and so on and so forth. Disappointed that you don't even have a little CLR James and Beyond the Boundary in there as well, but thanks very much.
I mentioned that. And Naipaul House for Mr. Biswas, A Bend in the River, Heart of Darkness.
Hold it. Stop. You're embarrassing all of us. Martin George, thank you very much once again for being with us.
Always a pleasure, Fazil, and good morning to you and your team.
Indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Martin George there. And really the serious thing is beyond the humor and beyond the references and so on, but it is a fact. Superheroes wear their jockey shorts on the outside. It's quite obvious. But really, it is bewildering that a government, which is the government of all of Trinidad and Tobago, would be at this stage, January the 13th, and talking about consultation, talking about discussion, claiming that this is going to happen no matter what and so on. And here we are in this situation, just 4 days away from this actually kicking in as what is supposed to be the way it has to be for public officers. But anyway, 6:37 in Trinidad and Tobago. And as we go out, we remind you of the COVID-19 protocol. So very important. They'll be up on your screen. And indeed, many of us don't need reminding, but maybe a few of us do. So just be mindful of all of these regulations to ensure that we stay safe, we stay healthy, and we protect ourselves and those around us for the good of ourselves and the country. Urvashi will be back with our next interview.